Before we begin this ancient journey together, settle into your most comfortable position. If you find yourself drawn to these tales of forgotten worlds and distant civilizations, consider joining us for more such explorations through the mists of time. Tonight we travel not just through space but through millennia, to a place where the very foundations of human civilization were first laid in mud, brick and hope. Close your eyes now, and let your breathing slow. We are about to step through the veil of time itself, back to an era when the world was young and humanity was just learning to dream of cities that could touch the sky. The crackling fire beside you will keep you warm as we venture into the scorching heat of ancient Mesopotamia, where rivers carved the destiny of nations and where people much like yourself faced each dawn with determination that would echo through the ages. About 6,000 years ago, in the southern reaches of what we now call Mesopotamia, a miracle began to unfold. Between two great rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, roughly 20 city-states emerged from the desert, like flowers blooming in impossible soil. These rivers were not gentle companions to the people who dared to settle beside them. They were wild, unpredictable creatures that could bring life-giving floods one season and devastating torrents the next. The sun above beat down with merciless intensity, temperatures soaring beyond 120 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the very air into a furnace that seemed to burn the breath from human lungs. Yet here, in this landscape that should have been impossible for civilization to take root, something extraordinary happened. The Sumerians not only survived but thrived, creating the world's first cities, the first writing system, the first laws, the first schools. They were not content merely to exist in this harsh land. They chose to transform it, to bend it to their will, to create something that had never existed before in the history of our species. They created civilization itself. Imagine, if you will, the courage it must have taken. These were not people blessed with modern knowledge of agriculture or engineering. They had no textbooks to guide them, no predecessors to learn from. They were the first, the pioneers, the ones who looked at an empty desert and said, "Here, we will build something permanent. Here, we will create a legacy that will endure." As you drift deeper into comfort, let us walk together through their world, feeling the sand beneath our feet, the sun upon our shoulders, the weight of history settling around us like a familiar blanket. We will experience life as they lived it, understand the challenges they faced, and marvel at the solutions they created. We will see through their eyes, breathe their air, and perhaps understand something profound about the human spirit that drives us always forward, always upward, no matter how impossible the circumstances may seem. The dawn of a Sumerian day begins, not with the gentle chirping of birds or the soft glow of sunrise, but with the oppressive weight of heat that seems to seep through the very walls of your dwelling, before the sun has even fully risen. You lie upon a mat woven from river reeds, each stalk carefully selected and dried under that relentless sun until it became as hard as wood. This mat is your bed, your furniture, your connection to the earth that supports everything in this land between the rivers. The walls around you are thick blocks of mud brick, each one formed by hand from the clay of the riverbank, mixed with chopped straw and dried in the merciless sun until it becomes hard enough to build with. These walls are over a foot thick, not just for strength, but because in this land, insulation against the heat is quite literally a matter of life and death. The roof above your head is more of the same, mud brick and wooden beams if your family has been fortunate enough to acquire timber, which is precious and expensive since trees do not grow readily in this desert landscape. The mat lies directly upon a floor of packed earth, dirt that has been wetted and trampled and dried so many times that it has become as hard as stone. There is no soft mattress beneath you, no cushioning between your body and the unforgiving ground. Every reed of your sleeping mat has pressed its pattern into your flesh during the night, leaving a map of lines and ridges across your back and sides. You have slept in this same position, with these same impressions for so many years that your body has learned to accept this discomfort as simply another aspect of existence. Your home is built around a central courtyard, open to the sky because this design allows the hot air to rise and escape while drawing in what little breeze might be stirring. The rooms of your house, your sleeping chamber, the storage areas where grain and water are kept, the kitchen space where meals are prepared, all open onto this central space. Most of the walls have no windows as we would understand them, perhaps only small openings near the ceiling to allow the heated air to flow out. Windows, after all, are invitations for the heat to enter, for dust to swirl in, for unwanted visitors, both animal and human, to find their way inside. In this pre-dawn darkness, the air already carries that thick, heavy quality that speaks of the furnace to come. Your throat feels parched, sticky, as though your tongue might cleave to the roof of your mouth if you do not soon find water. The last time you drank was yesterday afternoon, your carefully rationed portion from the communal well. Water in Sumer is surrounded by complexity and caution. Yes, the great rivers flow nearby, their waters carrying life through the channels and canals that feed the crops and sustain the cities. But these same waters carry dangers that the people have learned to respect. Animals drink from these rivers, and where animals drink, they also relieve themselves. People wash their bodies and their clothes in these waters. Sometimes, the bodies of those who have died upstream float past, a grim reminder that the river gives life and receives death in equal measure. The priests speak of gods dwelling in the water, but the practical reality is more immediate and more gross. The water must be carried to storage vessels, allowed to settle so that the silt and debris can sink to the bottom, sometimes boiled to make it safer for drinking. Every drop is precious, every container carefully guarded. Your stomach registers that familiar emptiness, not the sharp pang of true hunger, but the constant low-level awareness that food is never quite abundant, never taken for granted. Yesterday brought the usual meals that sustain life in this place. Breakfast was barley porridge, grains that had been boiled with water until they became a thick, filling mush. The midday meal consisted of flat bread, thin circles of dough slapped against the sides of clay ovens, until they became crispy and slightly charred, eaten alongside onions. Always onions. The evening meal was barley again, this time formed into cakes and mixed with beans that had been mashed into a paste. Onions feature in the Sumerian diet with such consistency that the very air of the cities carries their sharp, pungent aroma. If you cannot smell onions in the morning air, it means either you have fallen ill or your nose has simply surrendered to the constant assault and ceased to register the scent. After years of eating onions with every meal, most people find their sense of smell has adapted, giving up the battle to distinguish this particular odor from the background tapestry of city life. From beyond the walls of your house, the sounds of awakening Sumer begin to filter through the still air, footsteps on hard-packed earth, voices calling to neighbors, the scraping of tools against stone as the early workers begin their preparations. Someone, perhaps several houses away, has already fired up their communal oven and begun baking the first batch of bread for the day. The warm, yeasty scent cuts through the ever-present onion aroma, and your stomach responds with an involuntary clench of anticipation. Welcome then to Sumer, to the land between the rivers, to the world's first civilization. This is a place where comfort, as you understand it now in your warm bed with your soft pillows, does not exist in their vocabulary. The Sumerian language has words for reed mat and leather sheet, for wool blanket, if one is wealthy enough to afford such luxury. But there is no word for mattress, no concept of the soft, yielding surface that cradles your body as you listen to these words. Your house, like all houses in Sumer, is essentially a box constructed of those thick mud bricks, dried clay that has been shaped and hardened under the desert sun. The walls provide some relief from the heat during the scorching days and offer protection from the surprising cold that can settle over the desert during the night hours. The roof is supported by wooden beams if your family has been fortunate enough to afford them, or simply more packed mud if wood is beyond your means. Everything in this dwelling revolves around that central courtyard, that opening to the sky that serves as both blessing and challenge. It allows light to enter the house, permits air to circulate through the rooms, but it also admits dust when the winds blow, allows the rain to fall directly into your living space during the brief wet season, and provides no barrier against the intense heat of midday when the sun stands directly overhead. Most walls in Sumerian houses lack what we would recognize as proper windows. Perhaps there are small openings positioned high near the ceiling, designed to let the heated air escape rather than to provide a view or allow easy access. Windows, after all, represent vulnerability. They permit the entry of more than just light and air. They can allow thieves to observe the activities within, provide access for the various creatures that inhabit this landscape, and most problematically, they invite the heat to enter freely during those hours, when the sun turns the outdoor air into something that can barely be breathed. The air inside your house carries a complex bouquet of scents. There is dust, always dust, the fine particles that infiltrate every crack and crevice. There is smoke from cooking fires and oil lamps, the sharp tang of onions that seems to permeate every surface, and underneath it all, the earthy smell of the mud bricks themselves, that clay scent that becomes part of your hair, your clothes, your very skin. You could bathe every day and still carry this smell with you, though daily bathing is an impossible luxury when water must be conserved so carefully. So the interior of your house remains dim, even as dawn approaches. The thick walls create a perpetual twilight, broken only by the light that filters down from the courtyard and the small flame of oil lamps when they can be afforded. You sit up slowly on your reed mat, and your spine produces a series of small, sharp sounds as the vertebrae realign themselves after a night spent on an unforgiving surface. There is a specific ache that lives permanently between your shoulder blades, a discomfort that never truly disappears. This ache is shared by everyone, from the lowest laborer to the wealthiest merchant sleeping on wooden bed frames with woven reed platforms and woolen padding. It is simply another aspect of human existence in this place and time. In the corner of your sleeping chamber sits a clay jar, carefully crafted by skilled hands and designed to hold your emergency water supply. This vessel is cool to the touch, its clay walls naturally helping to lower the temperature of the water within. You are supposed to use this water sparingly, saving it for times of genuine need. But this morning, with your throat feeling as dry as the baked clay floor beneath your feet, the concept of sparingly seems somewhat negotiable. You reach for the jar, lifting it with both hands, feeling the coolness against your palms. The clay surface is slightly rough, bearing the marks of the potter's hands and tools. You tilt it carefully, allowing a small amount of water to flow between your lips. Not enough to truly satisfy the thirst that gnaws at you, but sufficient to coat your throat and give your mouth something to work with. The water carries the taste of the clay vessel, a mineral flavor that speaks of earth and sun, and the careful craftsmanship that created this simple but essential container. Setting the jar back in its place, you stand slowly, your joints protesting the movement with small pops and creaks. Your feet find the packed earth floor, still retaining some coolness from the night hours. You take a moment simply to exist, to breathe, to prepare yourself mentally for what you know is coming. Because here is the fundamental truth about life in ancient Sumer. Every single day is about survival. Not the dramatic, adventure-filled survival of stories and legends, but the grinding, relentless work of staying alive one day at a time. Finding water, locating food, avoiding disease, preventing injury, staying out of the path of the god's anger, these are the concerns that shape every decision, every action, every moment of existence. The gods of Sumer are not distant, benevolent figures who smile down upon their worshippers. They are capricious, demanding entities who must be constantly appeased, constantly fed, constantly praised, or they will unleash disasters upon the cities that depend on their favor. Stepping out into the central courtyard of your home, you see that the sky has lightened to that particular shade of grey that exists in the moments before true dawn. The stars are beginning to fade overhead, retreating before the coming sun. The sky in ancient Sumer, unpolluted by artificial light, unobstructed by tall buildings, seems vast in a way that is difficult to comprehend. It is as though someone has removed the ceiling from the world, revealing an endless dome of space that stretches to infinity in all directions. Today, like every day in Sumer, begins with work. The sun has not yet cleared the horizon, but already the day's labor calls. In this civilization, if you are not working, you are not eating. And if you are not eating, the consequences are swift and final. There is no safety net, no welfare system, no fallback position, work or perish. It is that simple, and that brutal. You pull on your clothing, which consists of rectangles of fabric wrapped around your body and held in place with belts or pins. If you are a man, you wear a knee-length skirt made from wool or linen. If you are a woman, the garment is longer, falling closer to your ankles, but constructed from the same materials. These are not the soft, comfortable fabrics of later eras. This cloth has been washed in the river and beaten against rocks, dried in the sun and worn until it has become more texture than textile. It is rough against the skin, scratchy and coarse, but it serves its purpose of keeping the sun from burning your flesh during the day and providing a thin layer of warmth during the surprisingly cold nights. Other people are emerging from their sleeping chambers, your family members if you have them, perhaps parents and siblings, spouse and children. Sumerian households tend to be multi-generational affairs where everyone lives together, works together, survives together. The concept of privacy, of individual space, of personal time, these ideas will not be invented for many centuries yet to come. Life in Sumer is inherently communal, shared, interdependent. Before you can reach the cooking fire, the sound arrives that governs all life in Sumerian cities, the gong. It comes from the center of the city, from the area near the ziggurat, that massive stepped pyramid that dominates the skyline and can be seen from any point within the city walls. This temple tower, this house of the gods, serves as both spiritual center and administrative heart of urban life. The gong is a signal, a call to work, a reminder that the survival of the city depends on the daily labor of its citizens. Someone has already begun the process of lighting a fire in the courtyard's designated cooking area. Smoke rises in a thin, straight column in the still morning air. The fire is small because fuel is precious, but it provides enough heat to warm water for the morning's barley porridge. This is breakfast in Sumer, the same meal that begins each day for the vast majority of the population. If your family has achieved some measure of wealth, there might be honey to sweeten the porridge, or dates to add flavor, perhaps even cheese. But even the wealthy eat barley. They simply eat it with more variations and additions. And in Sumer, work means one thing above all others: the irrigation canals. These waterways are not merely important to Sumerian civilization, they are Sumerian civilization. Remove the canals, destroy the dikes, break the reservoirs, and Sumer ceases to exist. The cities would crumble within seasons, their populations dead or scattered to whatever refuges they could find. It truly is that simple and that stark. The great rivers that gave birth to Mesopotamian civilization, the Tigris and Euphrates, are not like the predictable, gentle Nile that floods Egypt with such regularity that the people can plan their entire agricultural cycle around its rhythm. These Mesopotamian rivers flood violently and without warning. One year may pass without any flood at all, leaving the fields to wither and the people to face famine. The next year might bring such massive flooding that entire cities are swept away, their mud brick walls dissolved back into the clay from which they came. Worse still, these rivers change their courses, not gradually, over centuries, but sometimes quite suddenly, deciding to flow in a completely different direction, and leaving former cities stranded in the desert, like abandoned ships, left high and dry by a retreating tide. This has happened multiple times in Mesopotamian history, great cities that simply died when their life-giving river decided to flow elsewhere. Every single day people must work on these canals. They must clear away the silt that accumulates in the channels, reinforce the banks that are constantly being eroded by the flowing water, check for leaks that could waste precious irrigation, build new sections to extend the network or replace portions that have failed. This labor is backbreaking, relentless, and absolutely vital. If the workers slack off, if they take even a single day's rest, the system begins to fail, and if the irrigation system fails, everyone dies. This is not theoretical. This is not an exaggeration designed to create drama. Without the canals, there are no crops. Without crops, there is no food. Without food, there is starvation, disease, death, and the complete collapse of urban civilization. The mathematics of survival in Mesopotamia are harsh and unforgiving. So the Sumerians built their network of canals, an intricate system of waterways that crisscross the landscape like the veins and arteries of some vast body. These channels bring water from the rivers to the fields, from the fields to the cities, from the cities to the storage reservoirs where it can be kept against times of need. It is an engineering marvel that would be impressive even by modern standards, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. It is also a maintenance nightmare that demands constant, unrelenting attention. So when the gong sounds from the ziggurat, summoning the workers to their daily labor, you go. You pick up your tools, perhaps a wooden shovel worn smooth by countless hands, maybe a woven basket for carrying dirt and debris, possibly a hoe for breaking up the dried mud that accumulates in the channel bottoms. Then, you join the stream of people heading toward the city gates, hundreds or thousands of workers depending on the size of your particular city, all moving with the same purpose toward the same destination. As you walk through these streets, you pass shrines on almost every corner. These are small alcoves built into walls, containing clay figurines of gods and goddesses. Someone has already been here this morning, leaving offerings: a piece of bread, a small cup of beer, perhaps a flower or a bit of incense. The gods are always hungry, always thirsty, always in need of attention and appeasement. They must be fed constantly, praised regularly, given gifts and sacrifices, or they become angry. And when the gods of Sumer become angry, terrible things happen to the people who have failed to keep them satisfied. The streets of Sumer are narrow passages, perhaps 6 feet wide, running between the mud brick walls of houses that press close on both sides. These streets are not paved with stone or brick. They are simply packed earth, dusty during the long dry season, muddy during the brief periods when rain falls. The houses create a maze of passages that eventually lead to the main thoroughfares, the wider roads that connect the residential areas to the city gates, and the great public spaces around the ziggurat. Disease outbreaks, crop failures, floods, droughts, locust swarms, military defeats, all of these disasters are understood as manifestations of divine displeasure. The gods are not distant cosmic forces operating according to natural laws. They are intensely personal entities who take offense at slights, who hold grudges, who must be managed through careful ritual observance and generous offerings. So you make your offerings, you perform your prayers, you follow the instructions given by the priests, and sometimes this works. Sometimes the gods are appeased, and life continues peacefully. Sometimes it does not work, and people suffer and die. That is simply the way existence functions in ancient Sumer. You reach the city gate, a massive barrier of thick wooden doors reinforced with bronze bands. These gates are open now, allowing the workers to stream out toward the fields and canals, but their defensive purpose is always apparent. Guards stand on either side, armed with spears and copper axes, their eyes scanning the crowd and the landscape beyond for any sign of threat. They are there to protect the city from raiders, from armies of rival cities, from anyone who might want to steal Sumer's most valuable resources: grain, livestock, and people. Slavery exists in Sumer as a common and accepted institution. When one city conquers another, the defeated population often becomes enslaved to the victors. These captives are brought back to work the fields, construct the buildings, serve in the households of the wealthy. It is brutal, dehumanizing, and also simply the way warfare and politics function in this era. The guards at the gate are a reminder that your own city could become the target of such an attack, that you could wake up one morning to find enemy warriors at your walls, ready to kill or enslave everyone within. The overseer is already present when you arrive, the man responsible for organizing the work crews and ensuring that the day's tasks are completed efficiently. He stands near one of the larger canals, shouting instructions and pointing at different sections that need attention. He assigns people to different tasks based on their skills and the particular needs of each location. This overseer reports to the Ensi, the political and religious leader of the city. The Ensi reports to the gods. Everyone in Sumer reports to someone. This hierarchical structure is the foundation of organized civilization. Passing through the gate, you emerge into the landscape that surrounds every Sumerian city, a geometric grid of irrigation canals and cultivated fields. The site is striking in its organization and beauty. Green crops grow in neat, orderly rows, barley and wheat providing the staple grains that sustain urban populations, flax that will be processed into linen fabric, date palms offering both fruit and shade. There are vegetable gardens filled with onions, garlic, leeks, cucumbers, lettuce, and other plants that add variety to the Sumerian diet. All of this agricultural abundance is made possible by water drawn from the rivers through the canal system. Without these channels, this would be desert, empty, and lifeless. The canals themselves are wide trenches cut through the earth, some filled with flowing water that catches the early morning light, others partially dry and clearly in need of maintenance. This is where you will spend your morning, where everyone spends their mornings performing the endless labor that keeps civilization functioning. Today you are assigned to a crew working on a section of canal that has been filling up with silt. The water still flows through this channel, but slowly, too slowly to adequately irrigate the fields that depend on it. If the flow becomes any more restricted, the crops in this area will begin to suffer, people will go hungry. Children will cry from empty stomachs, so you dig. The sun beats down on your back, your head, every exposed portion of your skin. Sweat begins to flow from your pores, and soon you are drenched, your clothing soaked through. The air itself seems to shimmer with heat waves, creating a distorted view of the world that makes distant objects dance and waver like mirages. The sun is fully up now, climbing rapidly toward its daily position of dominance in the desert sky. The heat builds fast in this landscape, and within an hour of beginning work, the temperature has moved from merely uncomfortable to genuinely oppressive. Within 2 hours, it becomes what can only be described as brutal, a punishment inflicted by the sky itself upon anyone foolish or unfortunate enough to be exposed to its power. You scoop silt from the canal bottom, loading the heavy, wet clay into your woven basket. The silt clings to your shovel, your hands, your feet as you wade in the shallow water. Your back begins to ache from the constant bending and lifting. Your shoulders burn from the repetitive motion. Your hands develop new blisters on top of the calluses that already mark you as someone who works with tools for a living. This is life in Sumer. This is civilization. The world's first cities, built on the backs of thousands of people performing this exact same labor, day after day, year after year, generation after generation. The magnificent ziggurats that rise like artificial mountains from the centers of these cities, the sophisticated writing system that records laws and literature and learning, the complex social structures that organize thousands of people into functioning communities, all of it depends on this. People with shovels removing silt from irrigation channels under a merciless sun. Around you, other workers are engaged in the same task. Men and women, even older children, all contributing their labor to the common cause of keeping the water flowing. There is no concept of retirement in Sumer, no idea of weekends or vacation time. You work until your body physically cannot continue, and then you either have family to care for you, or you die. The mathematics of survival are harsh and unyielding. The overseer walks along the canal bank, watching the work, ensuring that everyone maintains the proper pace. Sometimes he offers encouragement, sometimes he issues threats. The line between motivation and intimidation is thin in Sumerian society, where survival depends on everyone doing their part, without complaint or delay. You continue digging as the sun climbs higher, and the heat intensifies. Your water ration, carefully measured out at the beginning of the shift, was consumed an hour ago. Your throat has returned to that parched, sticky state, where speaking becomes difficult and swallowing painful. The sweat evaporates from your skin as quickly as your body produces it, leaving behind a residue of salt crystals that makes your flesh feel gritty and uncomfortable. Someone begins to sing a work song, a rhythmic melody, designed to help coordinate the movements of the crew and make the labor slightly more bearable. Other voices join in, creating a harmony that rises above the sounds of shovels scraping against clay and baskets being filled and emptied. The lyrics speak of the gods, of water and harvest, of the hope that this year will be better than the last. Hope is a powerful force in Sumer, perhaps the only thing that makes the grinding difficulty of daily existence tolerable. This experience is so far removed from your current reality, lying in your comfortable bed with climate control and a glass of fresh water within easy reach, that it might seem like a fantasy or nightmare, rather than the daily reality, for millions of human beings who lived and died in ancient Mesopotamia. Yet these people were your ancestors, not necessarily in a genetic sense, but in a cultural and civilizational sense. They created the foundations upon which everything you know and use and take for granted has been built. By the time the morning work shift ends, signaled by another gong from the city center, you have moved several tons of silt from the canal bottom to the embankments. Your entire body aches with exhaustion. You are dehydrated, despite the water ration, covered head to foot in mud and clay, pushed to the very limits of physical endurance. But the canal flows more freely now. The water reaches the fields at the proper rate. The crops will survive another day, and so will you. The trudge back to the city takes place under a sun that has reached its daily peak of intensity. The temperature easily exceeds 110 degrees, possibly reaching 115 or even 120. In an era before weather stations and thermometers, heat is measured by its effect on the human body, and right now it feels like walking into a furnace. The air itself seems to burn as you breathe it. The city walls loom ahead, offering the promise of shade, but even in their shadow the heat is overwhelming. The mud bricks have been absorbing solar energy all morning, and now they radiate that heat back into the air. The entire city has become an oven, baking in the desert sun. Streets shimmer with heat waves that make the air visible. Dogs seek whatever shade they can find, and lie panting with their tongues lolling. Even the rats that infest every urban area move sluggishly in temperatures that push the limits of what living creatures can endure. You make your way through the maze of narrow streets back to your house, following pathways that are familiar despite the disorienting effects of heat exhaustion. The smells of the city envelope you, cooking fires and their smoke, the ever-present aroma of onions, the scent of humanity living in close proximity. Thousands of people crowded together within the protection of the city walls, with no sewage system beyond what individuals carry out to designated dumping areas, no running water except what people transport in containers, no garbage collection service beyond what each household manages for itself. The combination of these factors creates an olfactory environment that would be overwhelming to anyone from the modern world. Human waste, animal waste, rotting food scraps, smoke from various fires, the sweat of people engaged in physical labor, leather being tanned, metal being worked, incense from shrines and temples, and underlying it all, the omnipresent smell of onions that seems to permeate every surface and every breath of air. Reaching your house, you find that the central courtyard has become like the interior of an oven. The air is thick and motionless, trapped by the surrounding walls and heated by the sun that beats down from directly overhead. You head to the storage area where the communal water container is kept, a large clay vessel that represents one of your family's most precious possessions. There is a ladle beside the water jar, and the understood rule is that each person may take one ladle of water after returning from the morning's work. You take your allotment, lifting the clay implement with hands that shake slightly from exhaustion. The water is warm from sitting in the heat, but it is wet, and that is all that matters. The liquid hits your stomach and seems to disappear instantly, absorbed by a body that is desperately dehydrated. You want more water. You are entitled to more. You take a second ladle, but this time you force yourself to drink slowly, to actually taste and feel the water, rather than simply pouring it into the void of your thirst. The liquid carries a mineral flavor from the clay vessel, and a slight metallic tang, but it is the most delicious thing you can imagine at this moment. Someone in your household is preparing the midday meal, which consists once again of barley, this time formed into flatbread. The dough has been mixed with water and salt, perhaps with a small amount of animal fat if any is available, then slapped onto the side of the hot clay oven, where it bakes quickly into crispy, slightly charred circles. You eat this bread alongside onions, naturally, because onions appear at every meal in every season. You drink this beer through a straw, a reed tube, that allows you to sip the liquid while avoiding the solid particles that would be unpleasant to chew. The beer is mildly alcoholic, providing a gentle relaxation that helps offset the stress and pain of physical labor. More importantly, it is safer to drink than water because the brewing process kills many of the bacteria and parasites that contaminate water sources. There is also beer, one of the great Sumerian innovations that has enriched human civilization immeasurably. This is not beer as you might know it, with hops providing a bitter counterpoint to the sweetness of grain. Hops have not yet been discovered for brewing purposes. Sumerian beer is sweet, thick, almost porridge-like in consistency, because it has not been filtered. The chunks of grain and other ingredients remain suspended in the liquid, giving it a substantial texture and nutritional value. The goddess Ninkasi, whose name literally means lady who fills the mouth, is one of the most beloved deities in the Sumerian pantheon. She oversees beer and brewing, and people pray to her regularly, making offerings to ensure that the fermentation process goes well, and that the finished product provides both nourishment and pleasure. Beer is serious business in Sumer, not just as a beverage but as a food source, and a safer alternative to potentially contaminated water. You sit in whatever shade the courtyard provides, eating your bread and drinking your beer, trying to cool down from the morning's exertions. The shade helps somewhat, but the air temperature is still furnace hot, and your clothing remains soaked with sweat. Your skin feels sticky with salt and dust, creating an uncomfortable coating that makes you long for the luxury of a proper bath, though such a thing is impossible when water must be conserved so carefully. This is the midday rest period, the time when work in the canals stops because the heat simply becomes too dangerous for human survival. The wealthy retreat to the inner rooms of their larger houses, spaces that are better insulated and cooler. The priests perform their rituals inside the stone chambers of the ziggurat, where the thick walls provide some relief from the temperature. Everyone else simply tries to endure, to wait for the sun to pass its peak and begin its descent toward evening. Some people attempt to sleep during this rest period, though the heat makes true rest difficult. Others engage in light work that can be performed in shade, repairing tools, weaving baskets, mending clothes, preparing food for the evening meal. Children play quiet games, their usual energy sapped by the oppressive temperature. Life slows to a crawl, everything and everyone waiting for the worst of the heat to pass. You lean back against the mud brick wall of your house, feeling the warmth radiating from the clay blocks that have been absorbing solar energy all morning. Somehow, despite the discomfort, there is a strange peace in this moment. You are fed, you are hydrated to the extent possible, you are safe within your family's compound, and for these few hours, you are not required to perform back-breaking labor under the desert sun. Your eyes close despite the heat, and for a few precious minutes, you are not thinking about survival, about canals, about gods and their demands, about tomorrow's inevitable return to the same grinding routine. You are simply existing, breathing, being human, in a world that seems designed to make human existence as difficult as possible. And perhaps in ancient Sumer, this brief respite is about as close to happiness as most people ever come. The rest period ends when the heat drops from completely unbearable to merely oppressive, a change that is measurable more by gradual degrees than by any sudden relief. You rise from your place in the shade, your body protesting the movement with the aches and stiffness that come from both physical exhaustion and the dehydrating effects of extreme heat. It is time for the afternoon's work, different from the morning's canal labor, but equally essential to the functioning of Sumerian civilization. Today you have been assigned to work at the temple complex, the massive ziggurat that dominates your city's skyline and serves as both religious center and administrative heart of urban life. This stepped pyramid, rising like an artificial mountain from the desert floor, can be seen from any point within the city walls and from great distances beyond them. It is designed to be impossible to ignore, a constant reminder of the gods' presence and power, and of the human effort required to honor and appease these divine forces. Imagine this structure, if you will, as a wedding cake designed by ambitious architects and built by thousands of laborers over the course of decades. The base covers perhaps 3 acres, a massive platform of mud brick that serves as the foundation for everything above. Smaller platforms are stacked on top of this base, each one smaller than the one below, creating a stepped profile that rises approximately 150 feet into the air. The different levels are painted in various colors, white, black, red, creating a striking visual pattern that can be seen from miles away. At the very top sits the temple itself, painted blue to represent the sky where the gods dwell. Staircases run up the sides of the ziggurat, connecting each level to the next, allowing priests and workers to climb from the base to the summit. The entire structure represents humanity's attempt to create an artificial mountain, bringing the dwelling place of the gods down to earth, or perhaps lifting human worshippers closer to the divine realm. It took decades to build, required millions of mud bricks, employed thousands of workers, and consumed resources that could have fed a city for years. It stands as perhaps the most impressive monument to human determination and religious devotion that had ever been constructed. The courtyard buzzes with activity, even in the afternoon heat. An artist works on a mural that decorates one of the temple's outer walls, his pigments and brushes arranged carefully beside him, as he adds details to a scene depicting the gods receiving offerings from human worshippers. A child runs past, probably late for school, because yes, the Sumerians invented formal education, complete with teachers, curriculum, and students who would much rather be playing than learning to read and write. You approach the base of the ziggurat through a huge courtyard that surrounds the structure, an open space easily the size of 10 modern city blocks. This courtyard serves as the stage for city life, the place where markets operate, where public announcements are made, where religious festivals are celebrated, where criminals are executed, where the community gathers for ceremonies and celebrations. It is the heart of urban civilization, the space that makes a city more than just a collection of houses surrounded by walls. A woman sits in the shade of one of the smaller shrines that dot the courtyard, milking a goat that provides fresh dairy products for temple rituals. Someone nearby works with reeds, weaving them into baskets that will be used to carry offerings, store grain, or transport goods. Life continues in the shadow of the god's house, the daily activities of human existence playing out in the presence of the divine. But the ziggurat is not merely a religious building. It serves as the center of everything that makes a Sumerian city function: economics, politics, law, healthcare, education, administration. The priests who run the temple complex essentially run the entire city. They control the vast stores of grain that feed the population during times of scarcity. They organize the irrigation work that keeps the agricultural system functioning. They settle disputes between citizens, serving as judges and arbitrators. They diagnose illnesses and prescribe treatments, functioning as the only medical professionals available. They maintain the schools where children learn to read and write. They keep records of everything that happens in the city, creating an archive of human activity that preserves the memory of civilization. The Sumerians are, in fact, obsessed with record keeping. They invented writing specifically to keep track of temple accounts and administrative details: who donated, how much grain to the temple stores, who owes taxes and in what amounts, who received beer rations and when, which families are responsible for specific work assignments. Every sheep in the temple flocks, every bag of barley in the storage rooms, every jar of oil in the reserves, all of it is recorded on clay tablets in cuneiform script. Thousands upon thousands of these tablets exist, creating an administrative paper trail that would be impressive even by modern standards. Some of these ancient accountants were tracking every single animal in vast herds, every measure of grain in enormous granaries, every container of liquid in extensive storage facilities. It represents bureaucracy and middle management on a scale that seems almost comical, except that this meticulous record-keeping is what allows cities of tens of thousands of people to function efficiently. The priests are everywhere in the temple courtyard, easily identifiable by their clothing, which is noticeably fancier than what ordinary citizens wear. Their garments are cleaner, made from better fabric, more elaborate in design and decoration. They wear distinctive fringed robes that mark their religious status, and many sport elaborate hairstyles or have their heads completely shaved as signs of their devotion to particular deities. All of them carry an air of authority that comes from speaking for the gods and managing the affairs of the divine household. These priests serve as intermediaries between the human and divine worlds, and in Sumer, this is a position of enormous power and responsibility. The gods are not distant, abstract concepts. They are immediate, personal, temperamental entities who require constant attention and careful management. The pantheon of Sumerian deities includes over 3,000 gods and goddesses, ranging from major cosmic forces to minor spirits who oversee specific locations or activities. Enki, the god of water and wisdom, is generally more favorably disposed toward humanity. He is the deity who warned the hero Utnapishtim about the Great Flood and instructed him to build a boat to save life on Earth. This story, recorded in Sumerian literature, predates the biblical account of Noah by more than 1,000 years. Enki represents the positive potential of divine intervention, the hope that the gods might sometimes act to help rather than harm human beings. Inanna is perhaps the most complex and fascinating deity in the pantheon, serving as goddess of love, fertility and war simultaneously. The connection between love and war might seem strange, but Inanna embodies the fierce, passionate aspects of both emotions. She is based in the city of Uruk, and features in some of the most dramatic myths in Sumerian literature, including her famous journey to the underworld where she dies and is reborn, sending her husband to take her place in the realm of the dead. At the top of this divine hierarchy are the great gods, Enlil, Enki, and Inanna. An is the sky god, the ultimate authority in the pantheon, though he is largely retired from active involvement in worldly affairs. Think of him as the chairman emeritus of a vast corporation, still holding the title but no longer managing daily operations. Enlil is the real power, the god of air and storms, based in the city of Nippur, which serves as the religious capital of Sumer. When Enlil becomes angry, disasters follow: floods, droughts, crop failures, military defeats. He is not someone you want to offend. Below these major deities are hundreds of lesser gods and goddesses, each with specific areas of responsibility. There are gods for individual cities, gods for particular crafts, gods for specific natural phenomena, gods for household protection, gods for agricultural activities. The goddess Ninkasi oversees beer and brewing. The god Ninurta handles farming and hunting. The goddess Nisaba watches over writing and accounting. There is even a god for brickmaking, and another for the specific activity of carrying burdens. Each Sumerian citizen is expected to maintain relationships with multiple deities, the gods of their city, their profession, their household, their personal protection. This requires constant offerings, regular prayers, participation in festivals and ceremonies, and careful attention to ritual requirements. It is exhausting and expensive, but also absolutely necessary, because when the gods become displeased, they express their anger through natural disasters, disease outbreaks, military defeats, and personal misfortunes. Your work assignment today involves helping to transport offerings from the courtyard up to the temple at the top of the ziggurat. People bring offerings continuously throughout the day: food, drink, woven cloth, crafted objects, sometimes live animals. All of these gifts are intended for the gods, though in practical terms they are consumed by the priests who eat and use them on behalf of the deities. It is a convenient arrangement that ensures the temple staff is well fed and well supplied, while maintaining the fiction that the gods are receiving direct nourishment and material support. The stairs that lead up the ziggurat are steep and challenging, each level connected to the next by stone steps that require careful navigation while carrying heavy loads. Today you are transporting a large basket filled with freshly baked bread, while someone behind you carries a ceramic jar of beer, and another person struggles with a live chicken that is understandably unhappy about being carried up a giant pyramid in 110-degree heat. Each level of the ziggurat serves different functions in the temple complex. The lower levels contain storage rooms where the offerings are kept, administrative offices where the priests manage city affairs, and smaller shrines dedicated to various deities. The middle levels house the living quarters for temple staff and ritual preparation areas where ceremonies are planned and religious objects are created. The top level, your destination, contains the main temple, where only the high priest or priestess is allowed to enter. Everyone else stops at the platform just below, leaving their offerings where the priests can collect them and perform the necessary rituals before taking them into the divine presence. When you reach the top platform, The view is genuinely stunning. From this height, you can see the entire city spread out below like a map made real. The grid of narrow streets, the houses packed closely together for mutual protection and efficient use of space, the city walls forming a protective circle around the urban area. Beyond the walls, the green fields and the network of irrigation canals cut geometric patterns through the brown landscape of the desert. In the distance, the rivers wind their way south toward the Persian Gulf, carrying the water that makes all life in this region possible. You can also see other cities on the horizon, distant smudges that mark the locations of neighboring city-states. Kish to the north, Uruk to the south, Lagash to the east, all of them built on the same basic model, ziggurat at the center, urban area surrounding it, agricultural land beyond, canals connecting everything together. All of them are competing for the same limited resources, the same water rights, the same trade routes, the same agricultural land. All of them are sometimes allies and sometimes enemies, depending on the political situation and the ambitions of their rulers. On one of your trips down from the temple platform, you pass a group of student scribes sitting in the shade of the second level, practicing their cuneiform writing on clay tablets. A teacher moves among them, correcting their work and occasionally striking students on the head when their performance falls short of expectations. Sumerian education is not gentle or encouraging. These young men, all from elite families since only the wealthy can afford formal schooling, spend years learning to read and write. They must memorize thousands of cuneiform signs, practice writing on clay tablets that can be smoothed over and reused when they make mistakes, and learn mathematics, astronomy, religious texts and legal codes. You set down your basket of bread in the designated area and begin the journey back down the ziggurat. The process repeats throughout the afternoon, up and down, carrying different offerings each time, dates and figs, barley and oil, wine and crafted goods. The temple accumulates massive quantities of material because it employs hundreds of people who all need to be fed and supplied, priests and administrators, scribes and craftsmen, servants and guards. All of them depend on the temple for their livelihood, and all of them consume resources that must be constantly replenished through offerings and donations. The educational process is brutal and demanding. There exists an ancient student complaint letter, one of the world's first recorded examples of academic grievance, in which a young man lists all the times he was beaten in a single day for being late to class, for talking during lessons, for making errors in his writing, for having messy handwriting, for failing to recite texts correctly. The student then asks his father to invite the headmaster for dinner, offers gifts to the teacher, and suddenly finds his work being praised, and his future as a scribe assured. It represents the first recorded case of what might be called academic politics or strategic relationship building. The teacher walking among the student scribes glances at you as you pass, not with recognition or friendliness, but with the detached gaze one might direct toward a piece of furniture or a work animal. You are not in his social class, not part of his world of education and privilege. You are simply labor, a person whose function is to carry things and dig ditches and perform the physical work that keeps the city functioning. The social distance between you and this educated man is enormous and essentially unbridgeable. Sumerian society has a clear and rigid hierarchy that determines every aspect of life, from birth to death. At the very top stands the Ensi and his family. The Ensi serves as both political and religious leader, the person who manages temple land on behalf of the gods and oversees the administration of city affairs. His title literally means the one who divides the temple land, because all land in Sumer belongs to the gods, and the Ensi serves as their earthly representative and estate manager. Below the priests are the merchants and craftsmen, people with specialized skills that make them valuable to urban society. Potters who create the vessels needed for storage and cooking, metalworkers who forge tools and weapons, weavers who produce textiles, jewelers who create ornaments and religious objects. These artisans are not wealthy, but they are comfortable. They own their workshops, can afford decent houses, and enjoy some measure of security and respect. Then come the farmers and laborers, the category that includes you and most of the population. You work the land, maintain the canals, construct the buildings, perform the physical tasks that keep civilization functioning. You are paid in rations rather than money, beer and bread, barley and dates, occasionally fish or other protein sources. It is just enough to survive, nothing more. Just below the Ensi are the priests, the educated class who can read and write, who understand mathematics and astronomy, who know the proper rituals and can interpret divine omens. These priests also serve as doctors, since medicine and religion are closely connected in Sumerian thought. When you become ill, you consult a priest who will diagnose your condition by examining symptoms and perhaps by reading signs in animal entrails, then prescribe treatment that typically combines herbal remedies with magical incantations. You finish your transportation work as the afternoon heat begins to show the first signs of diminishing. The sun is still punishingly hot, well over 100 degrees, but at least it is no longer climbing toward an even more unbearable peak. The evening prayer ceremony is beginning, announced by the sound of a gong from the top of the ziggurat. People start gathering in the temple courtyard for the daily ritual in which the high priest offers sacrifices to the gods, leads prayers for the city's prosperity, and announces any important news or decisions. Everyone in this hierarchy, from the highest priest to the lowest slave, lives in fear of the gods. Divine displeasure can strike anyone at any time, bringing disease, accident, natural disaster, or military defeat. The only protection is to maintain proper ritual observances, make regular offerings, follow the guidance of religious authorities, and hope that your devotion will be sufficient to avoid divine punishment. At the bottom of the social hierarchy are the slaves, people who have been captured in war, convicted of crimes, or forced to sell themselves to pay off debts. They have no rights, no freedom, no hope of improving their situation. They work the worst jobs for no compensation beyond basic food and shelter, and they can be bought, sold, or killed at their owner's discretion. The priest sacrifices a lamb, performing the ritual slaughter that transforms the animal into an offering suitable for divine consumption. The meat will be eaten by the temple staff, who consume it on behalf of the gods, since deities cannot directly consume physical food. This arrangement ensures that nothing is wasted while maintaining the religious requirement that sacrificial offerings reach their divine recipients. The priest chants in what might be an archaic form of Sumerian, words that carry the weight of tradition and religious authority, even if their exact meaning is not clear to everyone listening. The general message is familiar: requests to Enel for his blessing on the city, prayers for adequate water to irrigate the crops, protection from enemies and natural disasters, disease prevention, and a successful harvest. These are the eternal concerns of agricultural civilization, the hopes and fears that drive religious observance in every season. You join the crowd, hundreds of people pressing into the courtyard, despite the continuing heat. The air fills with the scent of humanity, sweat and smoke, leather and metal, incense and food, and always the underlying aroma of onions that seems to permeate everything in Sumerian civilization. The high priest appears on the top platform of the ziggurat, wearing elaborate ceremonial robes decorated with gold thread and precious stones. He raises his arms, and the crowd falls silent. The ceremony concludes, and people begin to disperse, heading back to their homes through the maze of narrow streets. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. The temperature begins to drop noticeably, and within a few hours it will actually become cold, as desert climates shift from extreme heat to surprising chill with the disappearance of the sun. Following the sacrifice, the priest makes an important announcement. The MC has determined that a new section of canal must be constructed to improve irrigation in the Eastern Agricultural District. Work will begin next week, and all able-bodied citizens will be required to participate in this project. To encourage participation and maintain morale, extra beer rations will be provided to workers. The crowd receives this news with the resigned acceptance of people who understand they have no choice in the matter. More canal work means more back-breaking labor under the desert sun, but it also means the agricultural system will function more efficiently, and there will be additional beer to make the work slightly more tolerable. As you walk home, you pass a small shrine to Inanna, where someone has left fresh flowers and a cup of beer as offerings. The flowers are already wilting in the heat, and the beer is probably warm by now, but the gesture matters more than the condition of the gifts. The gods appreciate sincere offerings, even imperfect ones, and showing that you are making an effort to honor them is more important than the monetary value of what you give. Near your house, a small crowd has gathered around a man lying on the ground, clearly injured and in considerable pain. His leg is bent at an unnatural angle, obviously broken in what appears to be a serious fracture. This represents a genuine medical emergency in ancient Sumer, where a broken leg can easily become a death sentence. If the bone heals improperly, the person will be unable to work, and if you cannot work, you cannot eat. If infection sets in, which happens frequently in an era without antibiotics or proper surgical techniques, death is the likely outcome. Someone has already sent for a priest-doctor, the closest thing to medical care available in Sumerian society. The healer arrives carrying a bag of supplies, and immediately begins examining the injured leg. He makes pronouncements about which god might be responsible for this accident and why divine displeasure has manifested in this particular way. Then he begins the process of setting the bone, a procedure that must be performed without anesthesia or effective painkillers, though the patient might be given beer to help dull the agony. The man screams as the priest manipulates the broken bone, trying to align the pieces properly. Several people must hold him down to prevent his struggles from interfering with the treatment. The priest creates a splint using wooden sticks and cloth strips, chants incantations designed to drive away the demons that are believed to cause pain and infection, and applies a paste made from herbs and animal fat to the injury site. He then provides instructions to the man's family about care, feeding, and the prayers that must be offered to ensure divine assistance in the healing process. The injured man might survive this accident, or he might not. The outcome is considered to be in the hands of the gods, which is what the priest says about all medical situations. Everything is always in the hands of the gods, and human beings can only do their best to provide proper care while hoping for divine mercy. You continue toward your house, where your family is preparing the evening meal. Tonight's dinner features barley once again, this time prepared as a thick soup with lentils and onions for flavoring. There is also fish, fresh from the river, and grilled over the cooking fire, providing valuable protein that makes this meal somewhat special by Sumerian standards. Fish is not available every day, and when it appears on the table, it represents either successful fishing or sufficient prosperity to purchase it from someone else's catch. You eat sitting in the courtyard as the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, without any artificial lighting to compete with them. The stars in ancient Sumer are brilliant and clearly visible, creating a spectacular display that spans the entire dome of the heavens. The Milky Way appears as a glowing band of light across the sky, and individual constellations stand out with crystalline clarity. The Sumerians have been studying these stars for generations, mapping their positions, tracking the movements of planets, learning to predict eclipses and other astronomical events. After the evening meal, you sit with your family in the courtyard, enjoying the relief that comes with cooler temperatures and the end of another day's labor. Tomorrow will bring more work, more heat, more of the endless struggle to maintain the irrigation systems that keep civilization functioning. But right now, in this moment, with food in your stomach and your family around you, with the night air finally providing respite from the day's brutal heat, life seems manageable. It is not good exactly, but it is tolerable, and in ancient Sumer, tolerable represents a significant achievement. The margin between survival and disaster is thin, the line between adequate and inadequate resources is narrow, and the difference between divine favor and divine punishment can mean the difference between life and death. So when things are tolerable, when the basic needs of existence are met and immediate threats are absent, it constitutes a form of success. This astronomical knowledge serves both practical and religious purposes. The stars are understood to be gods, or at least to be controlled by divine forces, so understanding their movements helps predict the intentions and moods of the deities. But star observation also provides practical benefits, determining the proper times for planting and harvesting, navigation for traders and travelers, and the calculation of calendars that organize social and religious activities. Morning arrives once again, because time continues its relentless forward movement, regardless of human wishes or circumstances. You return to canal duty, but today brings a variation in routine. After several hours of the familiar work of digging silt and clearing waterways, the overseer approaches and assigns you to a different task. The city scribes need assistance with an inventory of grain supplies, and they require additional people to help move and organize the clay tablets that contain all the records of temple and civic accounts. The scribe school is an impressive facility that demonstrates the importance Sumerian society places on literacy and record keeping. The main classroom contains dozens of young men hunched over clay tablets, all engaged in the painstaking process of learning to write in cuneiform script. The sound of their work creates a distinctive rhythm, reed styluses pressing into wet clay, making small popping sounds as the wedge-shaped marks are formed. The noise continues constantly as students practice forming characters, copying texts and working on exercises designed to improve their skill and speed. This represents a significant improvement in working conditions. Instead of laboring under the open sun in temperatures that can easily become life-threatening, you will be working indoors, in the scribe school attached to the temple complex. The thick mud brick walls of these buildings provide substantial insulation against heat, and the interior spaces remain relatively cool, even during the most intense parts of the day. A teacher moves among the students with his hands clasped behind his back, observing their work and providing correction when necessary. He stops behind one student, examines the tablet, and delivers a sharp blow to the young man's shoulder. The student's cuneiform signs are poorly formed, and he must smooth out his clay tablet and begin the exercise again. This represents normal educational practice in Sumer, where mistakes are corrected through physical punishment, and everyone accepts this as the natural order of teaching and learning. Let me tell you about cuneiform writing, because it represents one of the most remarkable intellectual achievements in human history. The system began approximately 5,000 years ago as a practical solution to temple administrative needs. Officials needed to keep track of livestock, grain supplies, tax obligations, and other important information, so they used small clay tokens to represent different items. One token might represent 1 sheep, 10 tokens would represent 10 sheep, and so forth. The breakthrough came when someone realized that instead of storing thousands of physical tokens, they could simply press the tokens into soft clay to create permanent impressions. This evolved into drawing pictographic symbols directly onto clay tablets, with each symbol representing a specific object or concept. A drawing of a sheep meant sheep, bread looked like bread, and a human figure represented a person. But the system became truly revolutionary when the Sumerians discovered that symbols could represent sounds as well as objects. The word tai in Sumerian means both arrow and life, so the symbol for arrow could be used anywhere the sound tai appeared, regardless of the actual meaning of the word. This phonetic breakthrough allowed cuneiform to record any spoken language, complete with grammar, emotional tone, and complex ideas. The mature cuneiform system contains approximately 2,000 different signs, though this was later simplified to around 600 commonly used characters. Each sign can have multiple meanings depending on context. Some represent objects, some represent sounds, some represent entire words or concepts, and some represent syllables. There are no consistent rules that govern these relationships. Students must simply memorize all the possibilities through years of intensive practice. These young men in the scribe school began their education around age 7 and will not be considered competent until they reach their teenage years. True expertise requires years of additional practice and study. The educational process is demanding and often brutal, but it provides the only reliable path to social advancement in Sumerian society. Scribes do not perform manual labor, do not work in the killing heat of the irrigation canals, and do not face the constant physical dangers that threaten ordinary workers. Instead, scribes work in cool interior spaces, managing accounts and creating documents that govern the operation of cities and temples. They receive better compensation, enjoy higher social status, and are recognized as members of the educated elite. Parents who can afford the tuition fees and can tolerate watching their sons endure the beatings that accompany education are willing to make significant sacrifices to provide this opportunity. Your assignment involves moving tablets from one area of the building to another, handling these clay records with extreme care because they represent valuable information. Legal documents, contracts, religious texts, temple accounts. All of this material is more valuable than you are, frankly, and if you damage or destroy any of these tablets, you will face severe punishment. The head scribe, an older man whose shoulders are permanently hunched from decades of bending over writing tablets, notices your presence and waves you over. He asks if you can count, and you nod affirmatively. Everyone in Sumer must be able to count, because daily life requires constant mathematical calculations. Rations must be measured, work must be tallied, beer must be distributed in proper quantities, and trade transactions must be calculated accurately. If you cannot perform basic arithmetic, you will be cheated and exploited at every opportunity. Another tablet records a legal contract in which someone borrowed grain from the temple with the agreement to repay the loan after harvest, including interest charges. If the borrower cannot repay as agreed, their labor will belong to the temple instead. The entire arrangement is spelled out in careful legal language that leaves no room for misunderstanding or dispute. A third tablet appears to be a student exercise, with the same cuneiform sign repeated dozens of times as a young scribe practices forming the character correctly. The teacher's corrections are written at the bottom of the tablet, noting that the work is sloppy and must be improved. As you carry the tablets, you have opportunities to examine some of the cuneiform writing. Though you cannot read the complex script, you can recognize some symbols, particularly numbers, and your own name, which represents essentially the extent of literacy for most non-educated people. One tablet contains detailed records of the temple's sheep flocks, how many animals the temple owns, how many were born during the current year, how many died from disease or accident, how many were sacrificed in religious ceremonies, and how much wool they produced. Every single sheep is tracked and accounted for with obsessive precision. When the head scribe finally releases you from tablet-moving duties, you step outside into air that hits you like a physical blow. After spending time in the relatively cool interior of the scribe school, the outdoor temperature feels like walking directly into a furnace. The sun has reached its zenith, and the heat radiates not only from the sky above, but from every surface around you: walls, streets, rooftops, all of them baking in the desert sun and releasing their stored thermal energy into the already superheated air. You spend an hour moving these tablets between different areas of the scribe school, from storage rooms to study areas, from archives to administrative offices, from the school to the priest's quarters, where important decisions are made about city governance. The work is monotonous but not physically demanding, and most importantly, it takes place indoors where the temperature remains bearable, even as the sun reaches its daily peak of intensity. Through the windows of the scribe school, you can observe the marketplace coming to life despite the increasing heat. Trade and commerce must continue regardless of weather conditions, because people need food, tools, clothing, and other necessities. The market represents the economic heart of Sumerian civilization, the place where goods and services are exchanged and where the complex web of urban interdependence becomes visible and concrete. The smells are equally intense and complex: roasting meat from food vendors, fresh bread from bakers, dried fish with their distinctive aroma, rotting vegetables that have passed their prime, the sweat of people engaged in physical activity under extreme heat, animals and their waste products, incense burning at small shrines, leather being processed, metal being worked over fires that add their own contribution to the already overwhelming temperature. The noise level is extraordinary. Vendors call out descriptions of their wares and the prices they are asking. Customers haggle over costs and quality, engaging in the ritualized negotiations that govern all commerce. Animals contribute their own sounds to the cacophony. Children run through the crowd, their voices adding to the din. Musicians play for coins, and somewhere in the market, someone operates a stone grain mill, the grinding creating a rhythmic percussion that underlies all the other sounds. The marketplace represents controlled chaos on an impressive scale. Picture a large open area near the city gate, filled with hundreds of people despite the brutal temperature. Wooden stalls and reed awnings provide whatever shade is possible, and goods are displayed everywhere. Baskets overflowing with grain, hanging bundles of dried fish, clay pots filled with oil and honey, lengths of woven cloth, leather sandals, metal tools, jewelry, herbs, vegetables, live chickens confined in wicker cages. Payment is made in barley grain rather than coined money. Since coins will not be invented for another couple of thousand years, most transactions in Sumer operate through barter systems or the use of grain as a medium of exchange. You carry measured amounts of barley with you for this purpose, and the seller weighs your grain on a balanced scale to ensure that you are providing the agreed-upon quantity. You need to purchase onions, naturally, because your household supply is running low, which represents a genuine emergency since onions appear at every meal and are essential to Sumerian cuisine. The vegetable seller is a middle-aged woman with sun-darkened skin, wearing a simple dress and a head covering that provides some protection from the solar radiation. Her stall displays the products of the agricultural system you help maintain through your canal work. Onions, leeks, garlic, cucumbers, lettuce, all grown in the irrigated fields outside the city walls. The process of purchasing involves ritual negotiation that both parties understand and expect. You ask for 2 bundles of onions, and she names a price that is deliberately set higher than what she expects to receive. You counter with an offer that is lower than what you are prepared to pay. She acts offended by your proposal and suggests that you are trying to cheat her. You begin to walk away, demonstrating that you are not desperate enough to accept an unfair price. She calls you back and suggests a compromise. Eventually you agree on a price that is probably reasonably fair to both parties, though neither of you would admit this. Nearby, a metal worker displays copper tools that represent some of the finest craftsmanship available in Sumerian society. Axes, chisels, and knives gleam in the sunlight, their surfaces polished to mirror brightness. Copper is expensive and difficult to obtain since it must be imported from distant regions, so these tools are priced for wealthy customers. You examine them anyway, because they are genuinely impressive examples of human skill and artistry. The metal worker notices your interest and asks if you would like to make a purchase, but when you explain that you cannot afford copper tools, he laughs and suggests that you return when you have acquired some silver. Silver serves as the medium of exchange for major transactions in Sumerian society, Land purchases, large contracts, significant bribes, expensive imports. You have never held silver in your life, and probably never will, since it represents a level of wealth far beyond what most people can ever hope to achieve. Next to the metalworker, a potter offers clay vessels for sale, jars for storage, cups for drinking, lamps that burn oil to provide light. Pottery is more accessible than metal goods, because clay is locally available, and the production process, while requiring skill, does not demand expensive imported materials. Everyone needs ceramic containers since they break regularly and must be replaced. A woman examines a large storage jar, checking carefully for cracks that would make it unsuitable for holding liquids. She finds a flaw, points it out to the potter, and demands a reduced price. The potter argues that the crack is minor and does not affect the jar's functionality, but the woman refuses to budge, and eventually he agrees to her terms. This represents the fundamental nature of Sumerian commerce. Small-scale, personal transactions conducted face-to-face between people who know each other and who will continue to do business together in the future. Reputation matters enormously in this environment. If you cheat customers or sell inferior goods, word will spread quickly through the community, and your business will suffer. Conversely, if you deal fairly and provide quality products, customers will return and recommend you to others. Near the edge of the marketplace, a beer cellar operates what might be considered the most important business in the entire commercial district. Large ceramic jars of beer are covered with cloth to keep flies and dust from contaminating the contents. The sweet, yeasty aroma of the fermented barley can be detected from a considerable distance, and a small crowd of customers waits to make purchases. You approach the beer cellar and inquire about the price for a full jar of beer. She names a standard rate that reflects the commonly understood value of beer in the Sumerian economy. You do not attempt to negotiate because beer prices are relatively fixed, and everyone knows what beer costs. You hand over the required amount of barley grain, and she fills your jar with the thick, nutritious liquid that will supplement your family's evening meal. Dilmun holds a special place in Sumerian imagination, as both a real location and a mythological paradise. It is the island that the Sumerians believe represents their original homeland, the place where humanity first lived in harmony with the gods. But Dilmun is also an actual place that can be reached by brave or foolish enough to make the dangerous sea voyage across the Persian Gulf. Trade represents one of the most impressive aspects of Sumerian civilization. The river valleys of Mesopotamia lack many essential resources. There is little timber suitable for construction, no metal deposits for tool-making, no stone for building or sculpture. Everything must be imported from distant regions through complex trade networks that span thousands of miles. Traders travel up and down the great rivers, journey to mountainous regions, and sail across dangerous waters to bring back cedar wood from Lebanon, copper from Anatolia, shells and pearls from the Persian Gulf, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. While she prepares your purchase, you notice another vendor nearby selling something unusual, seashells that are clearly not from local sources. These are exotic shells, probably from the Persian Gulf coast, representing trade goods that have traveled hundreds of miles to reach this market. You ask the seller where he obtained these beautiful objects, and he explains that a trader brought them from Dilmun after a 3-week journey. You complete your purchases and head home before the midday heat becomes even more dangerous. The beer jar grows heavier as you walk, and the bundles of onions threaten to slip from your grasp. But you manage to reach your house before the sun makes outdoor activity completely impossible. Your family greets your return with appreciation, especially for the beer, which makes you something of a hero for the day. Yes, Afghanistan. In 3000 BC, people are trading goods across thousands of miles of difficult terrain, establishing commercial relationships that connect civilizations from the Mediterranean Sea to the Indus Valley. It represents an early form of globalization that demonstrates the human drive to exchange goods, ideas, and technologies across vast distances. The midday meal consists of bread, dried fish, dates, and now, thanks to your successful market expedition, fresh beer served in the traditional manner through reed straws that filter out the solid particles suspended in the thick liquid. You eat sitting in whatever shade the courtyard provides, though the shade offers only minimal relief from air that seems hot enough to burn. This is the daily rest period, when all outdoor work stops, because the temperature becomes genuinely life-threatening. Even the birds stop singing, and dogs lie motionless in whatever shade they can find. The entire city goes quiet, waiting for the sun to begin its descent, and the temperature to drop from lethal to merely unbearable. The afternoon brings different work assignments. Today you are sent to help with canal maintenance in a section that serves the Eastern Agricultural District, where a critical waterway has begun to show signs of serious problems. The channel has been gradually filling with silt and debris, reducing the flow of water to dangerously low levels. If this situation is not corrected soon, the crops in this area will begin to suffer, and ultimately people will go hungry. You lean against the courtyard wall and allow your eyes to close, trying to rest despite the oppressive heat. Your mind drifts, thinking about the scribes with their tablets, the chaos and energy of the marketplace, the exotic shells from distant Dilmun, the copper tools that represent craftsmanship you could never afford. Life in Sumer is undeniably harsh, but it is also filled with human activity, creativity, and ambition. People are not merely surviving, they are building, creating, trading, learning, making art and music and literature. The work crew assembles at the problem site as the sun begins its descent from the daily peak, though the temperature remains punishingly hot. The overseer explains the situation and assigns specific tasks to different groups. Some workers will clear debris from the water channel, others will reinforce the banks where erosion has occurred, and still others will dig new sections to improve the flow characteristics. You are assigned to a group that will be working directly in the water, wading into the canal to remove the accumulated silt and organic matter that has reduced the channel's capacity. This is actually preferable to working on dry land because the water, while muddy and not particularly clean, is cooler than the surrounding air and provides some relief from the heat. As you work, scooping handfuls of mud and debris from the canal bottom, you can see the immediate results of your labor. The water begins to flow more freely, moving at a rate that will adequately serve the irrigation needs of the surrounding farmland. This direct connection between individual effort and community benefit provides a sense of purpose that makes the physical discomfort more tolerable. The agricultural system that depends on these canals represents one of humanity's greatest achievements. Before the development of irrigation agriculture, people lived as hunter-gatherers in small mobile groups that had to constantly search for food. The invention of farming allowed humans to settle in permanent locations and accumulate the surplus food that makes civilization possible. But farming in Mesopotamia requires more than just planting seeds and hoping for rain. The climate is too dry and unpredictable for rain-fed agriculture, so the Sumerians developed their elaborate system of canals, dikes and reservoirs that captures water from the rivers and distributes it precisely where and when it is needed. This system allows a relatively small number of farmers to produce enough food to support large urban populations engaged in specialized activities like craft production, trade, administration, and religious observance. The canals also require constant maintenance and improvement. Silt naturally accumulates in any waterway, gradually reducing its capacity and efficiency. Banks erode from the constant flow of water and must be reinforced with stone or additional earth. Dikes and control structures wear out and must be rebuilt. New sections must be constructed to serve expanding agricultural areas or to replace older channels that have become inadequate. All of this work must be coordinated at the city level, because the irrigation system serves the entire community and affects everyone's survival. Individual farmers cannot maintain the major canals that serve their fields, and the work is too extensive for voluntary cooperation. It requires organized labor directed by civic authorities who can mobilize the workforce needed for large projects. The plow changes everything by allowing draft animals to do most of the work. A wooden blade attached to a frame cuts through the soil, turning it over and creating furrows where seeds can be planted efficiently. One person with a plow and an ox can accomplish what previously required 10 or 20 people working with hand tools. This increased efficiency means that fewer people need to be engaged in agricultural work, freeing others to pursue specialized occupations. As you continue working in the canal, you observe other aspects of Sumerian agricultural technology. In nearby fields, farmers are using plows pulled by oxen, a revolutionary innovation that has transformed food production. Before the invention of the plow, farming required people to dig individual holes in the ground with pointed sticks, plant seeds in each hole, and cover them by hand. This process was extremely labor-intensive and limited the amount of land that could be cultivated. You watch as a farmer guides his ox through a field, the plow blade cutting clean furrows in the earth, while the farmer walks behind, dropping seeds into the prepared soil. The ox provides the muscle power, the plow provides the mechanical advantage, and the farmer provides the skill and knowledge needed to coordinate the process. It represents a perfect example of how human intelligence can multiply the effectiveness of both animal strength and simple tools. The workday ends as the sun begins to sink toward the western horizon, and the temperature finally starts to decrease from its daily peak. You and the other workers trudge back toward the city gates, tired and dirty but satisfied with the knowledge that the canal is now functioning properly, and the crops it serves will receive adequate water. The evening meal at your house features the usual barley, this time prepared as flatbread, along with the onions you purchased at the market, and some dried fish that provides valuable protein. The beer you brought home is shared among the family members, each person drinking through a reed straw from the common jar. After eating, you sit with your family in the courtyard, as the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Someone mentions that tomorrow there will be a religious festival at the ziggurat, one of the regular ceremonies that mark important points in the agricultural and religious calendar. These festivals provide breaks from the routine of daily labor and offer opportunities for the community to come together in celebration and worship. You spend some time discussing the upcoming festival with your family, planning what offerings you might bring to the temple and what special preparations might be needed. Then, as the night air finally provides genuine relief from the day's heat, you retire to your sleeping mat for another night's rest, before tomorrow brings its own challenges and opportunities. The festival will feature processions, music, dancing, special foods, and elaborate ceremonies conducted by the priests. There will be sacrifices to the gods, prayers for continued prosperity, and public announcements about important civic matters. For most people, these festivals represent the closest thing to entertainment and social recreation available in Sumerian society. All of these activities depend on the cooperation and specialized contributions of thousands of individuals, each performing tasks that contribute to the survival and prosperity of the whole community. It is a complex, interdependent system that requires constant attention and effort from everyone involved. As you lie on the familiar reed mat with its unchanging pattern of ridges pressed into your back, you reflect on the day's experiences. The work in the scribe's school provided a glimpse into the world of literacy and learning that remains largely closed to people of your social class. The visit to the marketplace demonstrated the complexity and vitality of Sumerian commerce and the extensive trade networks that connect your city to distant regions. The afternoon's canal work reinforced your direct participation in maintaining the infrastructure that makes urban civilization possible. Each of these activities represents a different aspect of the elaborate social system that the Sumerians have created in their cities between the rivers. Education and literacy preserve and transmit knowledge across generations. Trade and commerce provide access to resources and goods that are not available locally. Infrastructure maintenance ensures that the agricultural foundation of civilization continues to function effectively.